Today, you and I will paint this lovely scene of the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco by Diane Zimmerman. I used an Arches pad of 8 by 10 cold press paper and 4 colors. French ultramarine, burnt sienna, which I already had on my palette from the Arctic Fox, quinacridone rose, and nickel azo yellow. These are the brushes I used. My silver black velvet number 10, and then my 3 silver whites, 4, 2, and 0, a number 1 rigger, and a size 2 scrubber brush. I'm ready to get started, and I know you are too. Let's bring these colors to life. Okay, I have masked out the sun, which is not in the reference photo, but I wanted it to be there just for interest and fun. I am putting a very light value of burnt sienna on the horizon line. And now some watered down French ultramarine for some interesting clouds in the sky. With a wet sky, you're going to get soft edges and wispy looking clouds. Today's painting is all about soft edges versus hard edges. Lots of practice today with the fog and the sky. And now I'm going to continue down below the horizon line and work on the fog and the mountain. I am being careful of the bridge, the horizontal lines that are there, but you don't have to be because we are going to be putting a dark value on that. Okay, continuing to get the paper all wet all the way down to the bottom with my number 10 silver black velvet. I'm dropping in some grays where I see them on the reference photo and adding some brownish gray to the mountain. This is just our first layer, so it does not need to be, it never needs to be exactly like the photo, but for the first layer, it's okay to just keep your values very light and see where this is going. In order to soften a line, what I do is I get my brush all rinsed out in clear water, and then I dab it onto an old t-shirt. I have scraps of old t-shirt. I find that that is the most absorbent material and easy to deal with. And then with the damp brush, there isn't much water in it, it's just kind of damp. I swipe it along the hard line. And I do the same thing when I just want to blend some colors too. Off camera, when I dip into the water, that's what I'm doing. I'm usually dabbing it onto the t-shirt scrap to get most of the water out. I'm dabbing out some of the water at the base of the mountain with a paper towel, and I let it dry. Now I'm wetting it again, but I'm being careful of the little coastline there with a little bit of white cap. I'm not getting that part wet. And if you can look at the reference photo really carefully, you'll see that the water has a green tinge to it. So I'm making a greenish blue water color to put down at the base there. And softening. And sometimes I soften because I want it to disappear, and sometimes I soften it because I don't want it to grow out onto the paper, spread out onto the paper, and dry in a hard line. See that one right at the top there that I'm working on? That would have dried hard. but I don't want it to. I want it to be soft. So I use my wet, damp brush with clear water and move it around. And to keep it loose, today I'm using the paintbrush back towards the middle and back towards the end of the brush. I'm holding it way far away from the bristles. It's pretty fun to do. It lets you have less control. If you're a control freak like me, this is pretty fun because I don't have to worry about the little tiny shadow or staying in a line, which is also fun, but sometimes you don't want to do that. And now to deepen the value a little more on the mountain, I'm on dry paper. I am adding some more of the brown tones and mixing up the grays a little bit with a little more pigment than the first time. And this will be our second layer on the mountain. There is a little bit of green hiding back there behind the fog. And then this part of the mountain is a little bit more dark. So I'm using a tone with a little more blue than burnt sienna. It's still a little bit wet right there on the edge, and I should have waited for it to dry before I did this, but I just didn't think of it. And it's totally okay that if it bleeds a little bit. It's getting to be a little bit too brown in that spot where I want it to be fog. So I'm just going to soak it up with a paper towel. These colors are pretty easy to lift and erase because they're not staining. However, when we get into using the quinacridone rose and the nickel azo yellow, it won't be as easy to lift. I had started to put in some clear drops for some texture on the mountain, but then decided that it wasn't deep enough in value. So I went over the whole thing again with some more pigment and then blended it. And now I'm doing some more water drops. Just splatting them on, and then I'm tilting the block to get them to move with gravity. And here I'm splatting in some pigment as well. Easy way, that's an easy way to get some good texture and interesting color variation. I'm going to start working on the bush on the right-hand side at the bottom. I'm going to use a dry brush technique. I'm holding the brush over the top with my fingers so that I can get the brush onto the belly of the bristles. I'm just scraping on the paint, trying to get that sweeping motion look from the reference photo. I want it to have a little bit of movement, so I am letting the edges scrape along the texture and leave an interesting edge to that, to the branches. I had forgotten to put in the blue sky in the pillars of the bridge, so I'm just adding it now. With clear water, I've wet the sky, and I'm going to add a little bit more pigment. I mixed the burnt sienna with a little bit of quinacridone rose, just to give it a little more vibrancy. I'm making another green. You saw how I used a little bit of yellow with the ultramarine and a little bit of burnt sienna. to dull it down, and I'm adding it onto the mountain. And then with a very light value of burnt sienna, I'm going to define the edge of the mountain. I'm keeping it very light because of the fog. I want it to look foggy. And then with a light value of a darker color, I finished off the bottom. With some clear water on my silver white number 4, it looks like, I am going to try to define some shapes in the fog. That left side wasn't reading as fog. It was just reading as, I think, as clouds. I think removing pigment is just as important as adding pigment. I really like the effect it gives to your painting. It gives it some mystery. And again, you don't have to be careful of those 2 lines. What's going in there is darker than the surrounding area. I'm mixing up a dullish purple color for the mountains in the background. And with a medium to light value, I'm going to add in the mountains. And I'm going to use some clear water to soften the bottom edge. And when I do that, it's a little bit more watery than damp. You want there to be enough water to spread out the pigment, but not too much that you make it go wild. It just takes practice to find that happy medium. If you like this video, remember to give me a thumbs up, subscribe, and share with your friends. Let's continue on with these little mountains. You'll see that I am softening the bottom edge of the mountains. If you're not getting the hang of that, that's okay. Practice it here, but if it doesn't turn out how you like, there's always the scrubber brush, which I will be using at the end of the painting. See, I did a little bit too much water there and it took all the pigment out. So you just put it back in and try something else. Now I'm going to mix a maroon color for the pillars of the bridge. I mixed a little burnt sienna with the quinacridone rose, and then I added French ultramarine, and now I'm adding a little yellow to dull all that down. I didn't water down this puddle very much because I want this to be pretty dark. This is where our focal point will be, so it's going to be dark and have the highest contrast of the painting. My windows are looking a little wobbly. You're not seeing things, but that's okay. I'm going to come back after it dries and work on it some more and give it some more definition and be a little more careful. I'm making this side of the pillar darker because of the sun behind it. It's in shadow, so the red is not going to be very bright. And then the one that's off in the distance is more gray, so kind of a grayish red. So I added a little bit more burnt sienna. Here I'm mixing a very dark gray with a lot of pigment, burnt sienna and French ultramarine, and I'm filling in the bridge part of this. And to get a straight line on both ends, I just flipped it over so I could get a pretty straight line on the bottom edge. And now with a paper towel, I'm dabbing out a little bit of the pigment so I don't have a big dark line going down the middle of the painting. And here with my number 1 rigger, I am adding in the cables. And I was holding my breath. Because I really wanted this to work out. I really did not want to make a mistake on this part. But you know what there is if we do make a mistake? The scrubber brush. Now I'm going to just dab on some clear water and wipe it off with the paper towel so that it isn't so continuous. I want a variation in value, and I want it to look far away back there, and then up here I want it to look high up. And when you're looking at something in real life, you don't see it so clearly like that at every distance. Now, the easy part for these other cables, these vertical cables, is to use a pencil and a ruler. And you'll notice that at the beginning of the bridge from the left, the cables are a little further apart because they are closer to the photographer. And then as we get closer to the middle of the bridge, they become closer together because they are further away. And if your paper is completely dry, it's okay to go ahead and erase. It's also okay if your pencil marks are really dark, because we are going to go back over this with a kneaded eraser and dab out a lot of it. For the real-time video voiced over with the outline, reference photo, value study, and all the outlines in various sizes, check out my Patreon. I've got over 20 videos over there now, and this is my latest one that released yesterday. And here is the kneaded eraser. I just dab it on the pencil marks, and some of them come off and some of them stay. Remove the masking fluid if you put some on for the sun. And I'm getting out my small scrubber brush because I can still see some pencil line and I want to get rid of it. And I want that sun to look really soft, as if it would really look up on a foggy day. I'm going to also soften the edges and the middle and some other spots of the bridge. There's some fog wisping over the top of it, so I'm just softening it to look like fog. And then everywhere you see on your own painting that you want white, just use a lot of water on your scrub brush and wipe it out. I'm barely touching the paper, so don't go too hard. You don't want to get a big hole. These edges down here were a little bit jagged, so I'm just cleaning those up. And now I've got some more of the maroon on my size 0. And I'm going to be more careful for this second layer and get the vertical lines straight. And the horizontal lines have a little perspective, so they're a tiny bit slanted. I'm mixing up another green because this little bush down in the right looks pretty lonely. It needs to be there for scale, but I'm just going to add a little bit more, a second bush over here in the right-hand corner. And you saw there that I showed you how I'm holding the brush over the top so that I can get the brush onto its belly. And I'm letting the texture of the paper show at the ends of each stroke so that they are not regular or straight or hard. And adding a little bit of splatter to show movement. And now I'm just tapping in some water drops. And I want them to move up, so I'm holding the block up slanted so that gravity can take the water down. And I'm comparing values with my black and white copy, and I realize that the left corner needs to be darker. So even though I thought I was done, and I even did the water drops and everything, it's okay to go over them. They are going to show through. And I think it just adds a little more interest and a little more depth because I'm just adding this on top. The water drops from beneath will show through a little bit, and then I'm going to add more water drops. A little more green. And then down here, it's also a little bit more dark. I hope you enjoyed this video and learning how to make smooth, soft lines in atmospheric conditions. I had a lot of fun, and I hope you did too. Have a great day, and thanks for watching.